Hi, and welcome to the 55th installment of the ChessTDD series. Unfortunately, this time around, it has been quite a while since I did the last one, so I'll try to get back into the swing of things here, and hopefully my cat, who has just decided to join me, doesn't make too much noise for this to go well. What I am doing that is different than last time is, it was something I left off with last time, was making note of that failing acceptance test in Trello. That actually turned out to be a really cool idea because not only did it give me a great context clue as to where I left off, but it also really kind of helped me get back into the flow of what I was trying to accomplish. It isn't perfect, obviously. You're going to see me have to kind of fudge my way through Trello, eliminating a bunch of extra space characters or something. I don't know exactly what that's all about, but I did get it squared away here after some mixture of manual typing and copying and pasting. I think I decided it was not necessarily the best approach to hand type all those spaces once again. So once I get through rehydrating this situation, what we're going to see here is I've been kind of trucking along with castling, but now I'm at the point where I want to say, okay, we've stuck a piece in between the king and the rook. And according to the rules of chess, that creates a situation where I shouldn't be able to castle. So what's expressed down there in the pieces is the castling move 7-1 is there because I can castle to the right, to the king side. But the castling option 3-1 is not there, or it shouldn't be. The test is currently failing because it is there. Now, it did take me a minute to get my bearings, and this time around I'm recording the audio right after coding. So what I was doing here is trying to think through, hey, didn't I have this Pathmaker class before that maybe I could use for this? I'm admittedly getting a bit ahead of myself. And so to sort of settle down a little bit, I decided, well, I'll tell you what, let's not get too crazy and let's express this failing acceptance test scenario with a more tangible failing unit test. I think that was going to be, in my mind, a better way to kind of not get caught trying to boil the ocean. So I don't think it should be too hard to express what I want to do here as a unit test. Well, in fact, I know it's not because I just did it, but at the time I didn't think it would be too hard. So I'm going to write a test here and basically say that if I block off this king side castling, then I should only get one of these castling moves back. And this, recall, is a unit test that's oriented around this castling, what's it called? Castling status checker. So I'm not going through board anymore. I'm going right at the castling status checker because I'm feeling pretty good about that being the place I want to implement this logic. I did struggle perhaps a little bit momentarily with this thought of, should I do it in board? Because board is where that path checker thing exists, and that's a fairly handy construct. And if I haven't done it already, you're also going to even see me as I think about how to get this guy passing, I think it was. I start to look at it and say, like, it seems like there is some logic here about making paths and end coordinates and some other things that's going on in board that maybe I could extract. But I didn't want to go down that road quite yet. I think maybe I'll leave that aside as a refactoring exercise, perhaps when I start to implement the stuff where I do the polish on the series, so to speak. But we'll see. However, that being said, this is kind of where my brain was going, and something you'll see as you go along, especially as your code base gets more and more complicated. These feelings of, I think there's something like this somewhere else, and maybe I should reuse it. Usually, if you have a feeling like that, it's probably a good feeling that you ought to consider exploring, at least checking out, doing a little bit of a spike with or something. If you're getting the sense that you're re-implementing the same thing, or you're re-implementing, something that maybe one of your teammates implemented, it's a good time to stop and check. You don't want what's called oddball solutions in your code base. So you'll at least at some point see that line of thinking go on in my head here, expressed in me, I guess just kind of sitting there staring at the screen, boring you just a little bit. But I will try to keep you entertained through it by narrating what's happening here. So I think this is now what you're seeing. I'm looking at what's going on in this method signature, like, okay, what arguments do I have here? I can see where the rook starts and where the rook should go if it's a success. Okay. Can I infer the king start? Sure. Is it legal to do that, or does it make sense to do that? So now I'm looking at this concept of, okay, I know somewhere I'm calculating blocked. Oh crap, it's in the board class, which maybe is doing more than it ought to be. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that these days 160 some lines is fairly long for a class. This is a bigger class than I like to have. So I think the en passant stuff should get out of here, the way we did with castling status checker. And really, I think a lot of this stuff about blocked should probably get out of here too, if possible. The real purpose of this board class is essentially to provide a nice wrapper around this two-dimensional array of pieces for adding and removing and moving them around and such. All of the calculation really is a different responsibility. So that's, something that's maybe interesting about watching someone code in real time and getting a feel for, how does unit testing, how do TDD and acceptance testing and all these things work. In a non-trivial project, one of the interesting things is to see that trade-off, to see that friction or whatever you want to call it. It's not like when I'm doing these things, I keep the code base in some kind of pristine condition all the time. That's why I rely on periodic spot checks, sanity checks, code reviews, peer review, static analysis, all these things to kind of tell me, oh, you're drifting a little far. in a way, not that it's the greatest, but I'm almost code reviewing myself with this because I'm not revisiting it as often as I would like a project I was normally working on. So I get in here and I have more opportunities to kind of have the, effect of a stranger looking at it where I'm saying like, man, this isn't great. So anyway, the point is, there is no ideal solution as you're going. You kind of make decisions in the moment and you do your best, and hindsight's 2020. So I can see that there are things about this board class that aren't great. You don't always immediately just drop everything you're doing and say, there are things about this class that aren't great. So, forget about these deadlines and things that I have. I'm just going to go and make it perfect. One thing I've heard express this very well is that shipping is a feature. So it's not to say that you cut corners, but you'll wind up in a situation where you've implemented things imperfectly. You make note of things that probably ought to be done, and you prioritize. And so I kind of want to try to get a correctly functioning moves forecaster, or whatever you want to call it. I want to get this out the door without a whole lot of fanfare and making everything perfect. But that doesn't stop me from carrying it around in my head that the board class is probably not as awesome as it could be, I suppose. Okay, so on to the present here. What I'm doing is I'm kind of struggling. So I'm looking around in the code base and I see that I have this path maker and I see that there's stuff going on in board and there's already kind of this mutual dependency, so I don't want to touch that. So I said, let me put a pin in that and do something kind of dumb here. I know for this particular test case that the spaces in question are column 6 and column 7. So I'm building a list out of those spaces and selecting them into a couple of board coordinates, and then I'm going to call is blocked. Essentially, I'm going to check to see are there any of these things where there's a piece there. Now, this is a little bit complex in terms of the simplest thing that could possibly work if you're thinking of it that way, but keep in mind that I am pretty familiar with LINQ. I've been playing in this space with these fluent extension methods for a really long time, so to me, this is quite simple. It's a good declarative way to say, like, give me board coordinates for 6 and 7, and then I'll check for this is blocked thing. You might want to go simpler. Then again, this probably wasn't the greatest. I was kind of struggling for like, there's like enumerable.repeat. I was trying to think of one. There's one that gives you a sequence, and I just couldn't think of it off the top. So what I wasn't going to do is sit there forcing you to stare at me picking through IntelliSense. So I just went with something I knew would work and reasoning that I could make that better later, which is sort of the essence of the TDD approach. So now what I want to do is, this is pretty kludgy, and I already think that I probably want to put this in get castle move if available, but I'm going to say, all right, if blocked, then this king castle thing is going to be empty. Otherwise, we can go with what we were doing before. And that is cool because I see in the bottom right corner from nCrunch that while I'm still failing, now I only have one test that's failing. So let's go see what the problem is. And this is one of the places where, really it can be gold to have your acceptance test and then to also express it as a unit test. Because what it turns out happened here was that I inadvertently created a problem that I didn't stop to consider when writing the test. So it was a problem now with the test, not the implementation. Basically, I had written the unit test in a way that didn't actually express my acceptance test. And there was a secondary problem that doing what I did just hid, as you see this go green, but you'll see it come back later, which is that I also forgot that putting a piece right next to the king restricts yet another move on the king. So I'm good for now, but I know this implementation isn't going to cut it. So let's do the other side. And it's a little bit maybe arbitrary why I decided to do this with a unit test, frankly. Could have tossed a coin. We certainly could use some more acceptance tests around this construct, but I went with a unit test because, I had good mojo going with it. I had just had the unit test go well, helped point me at an acceptance test that wasn't written well. So, sometimes it's kind of simple things like that when you're making a decision, like, what do I feel good doing? What have I had some recent wins and successes with? And kind of let's keep going there. Suppose the flip side of that is, there might be a fine line between that and being in a rut, but all things with balance. I think that's one of the main reasons to kind of do this series is so you can, if you're so inclined, see how someone else approaches these things and makes these trade-off decisions. Okay, so I have written a unit test, and now I am concerned that it is passing. And as I have said countless times throughout this series, if you expect that you're going to write a test and that test is going to go red and it doesn't, don't just keep going. That's not a happy accident. Figure out what the problem was. In this case, it was something dumb. I had typed the wrong thing in there. So now I do have a properly failing test. And now I'm starting to think about, I think at this point I actually get a little bit too cocky. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this thing. And to me, this is the simplest thing that could work at the moment. I turn out to be wrong about this, but I think, okay, what I'll do is I'll move this construct that I created down into the castle moves if available. And when there, I'll kind of use the compiler to help me generalize it. So at this moment, that's a simple thing. But the trouble is I probably should have considered backing out once it started to get complex, when I was like, oh, okay, well, spaces between king and rook. Now I'm generalizing, so I'm not sure which side this is on. So, this is where I probably should have stopped. But what I decided to do instead was make use of my path maker. And I thought, okay, so I can still do this, right? The one thing I'm missing is the path. I'll just use a path maker, and that'll get me my path. And you'll watch me kind of flail and struggle here for a while and see why it probably would have been better to express this in a different way. I guess the upside of bringing PathMaker in here is I'm, to some degree anyway, avoiding the oddball solution factor that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to reuse the PathMaker. So now I start to hit trouble with, endlessly confusing these X and Y coordinates. You can see me doing it right here. But I'm saying, okay, so PathMaker from what and to what? I know where the rook start is by what's passed into this method, but, gosh, So the king is always going to be at 5 or we wouldn't be here. And then I do this. Oh, okay, well, that's still okay because now I just need to add not is blocked to the conditional. And then everything should pass. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Unfortunately, reality turns out to be crueler than that in that I have made, by my count, there are still at least 2 mistakes in here. I do get them straightened in fairly short order. By now, I am used to saying, like, oh, it looks like I've transposed the reasoning about x and y. The thing that's variable here is the row, not where the king sits. And actually, it's quite nice for the purpose of chess and what I'm dealing with here, that there's this mirror thing, that the queen and king, the pieces are in the same columns. That helps. So I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I'm doing the sorts of things that you do when you're debugging, which is to kind of, put your head in your hand and stare in frustration at the screen and click around a little bit. Try to resist the temptation to go into the debugger because you're always tantalizingly close to green. And I'm like, oh, okay, there we go. I transposed these things, so now I should be good. No. Still 11 failing unit tests. So I was really trying to think a lot about what this could be. Eventually I saw the time kind of slipping away from me here and went into the debugger, and that sorted it pretty quickly. Oh, and then first I kind of did this sanity check. That's a useful thing to think about. The reason I did that was I said, let me get rid of this is blocked and get back to kind of square one. If I do that, have I done any like crazy weird things that are going to make it so that there are actually like 5 tests failing now? So just to kind of retrace my steps and make sure that the universe is still as I remember it, so to speak, then I start my debugging. So I still have those 2 failing tests that I was that I had started with there before. Now I go in and what I'm really interested to see is what spaces between king and rook looks like. So I remember that F10 is a shortcut for Camtasia to stop, so I didn't do that. Now I'm going to expand this results view, and I want to see what I've got, and immediately I know the problem. Can you see what it is? I won't give it away, but I've already figured it out. Now I'm just about to go into, remember here I had some kind of trouble. I'm going to go in and look at board to see how it's using PathMaker. So start looking here, last space. I'm kind of interested in stuff, spaces along the path. What I realize is that the PathMaker is getting the endpoints inclusive, and that's not what I want here. I only want the pieces in between. So I started to think, man, like, should I add to PathMaker a method where you trim off the 2 endpoints, like, PathMaker inclusive or not? Opted not to do that because I kind of snapped back after getting a little far afield. I said, like, let's go back to the simplest thing that could work, which is just to say I'm going to filter out, because I know here in this method what I'm passing in. So I'm going to filter out these 2 x coordinates. And that gets me to green. Now at this point, this is a fairly ugly method. All I did here, by way of refactoring, is to get rid of this magic number, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to go here and call this the king column. So that I'm going to factor in here, but then the rest of this I'm just going to leave. I didn't make a Trello card to do any more cleanup. Now I probably could. Oh, I think I pulled the coordinate out too. Got a little wide for my taste there, I guess. I could do more with this method to make it readable, but it's not the most heinous thing in the world. It actually only has 1 control flow statement, just a lot of intermediate local variables to try to make this thing reasonable. So I could probably extract a little method out for that where clause might be a good idea. This isn't the worst thing on earth, and I'm really trying to be mindful of time. And what I wanted to do is really kind of see where things stood with this acceptance testing, because I think I'm done with this feature, and it'd be nice to put a little bow on it here before I go. So what I did was come back here to see if I could sneak in a couple more quick acceptance tests. So the first one I want to do is like, well, okay, we should get no castling moves if both sides are blocked. Then I panicked because this still failed. And this is what I mentioned earlier. What I was forgetting about is if I use the white queen, that 4-1 move I would also need to get rid of. So I figured that out. But what I did instead was just remove the queen and put in a different piece. And then doing this should give me the range of movement I would expect for the king. So there's that. Now where I really crossed my fingers is I'm gonna duplicate this test again and then tweak it and say that this works for the black. And I think just testing the block scenario for black on both sides at the same time will make me feel good enough that this is working. Can always flesh it out more later, but kind of based on, I guess, the smell test and my own knowledge of programming and such, it certainly looks like it ought to work for any arbitrary row. So what I want to do is verify that I'm getting the blocking logic correct in these two places, and then call it an episode so that I can start to move on to the notion of check. So really what I have to do is kind of create the mirror Y situation here, which is to go 8, 7, 7, 7, 8. And then if everything goes green, it's a big win, and we can all go home happy. And sure enough, that's what happens. So it is always nice to get to the end of an episode right around the 20-minute mark while being able to move an actual card over and then commit and push to master. So that's what happens here. Next time in episode 56, I'll kind of figure out how to approach the castling thing, figure out what to do next, or I'm sorry, the check thing, and kind of see how it goes from there. Hopefully it goes well. I will see you next time.